5th. Yeah, okay, Stephanie's recording. All right. But we have a goal in this class to be able to give people knowledge about how to celebrate the holidays too. So even though we're just talking about history. So who has a comment, question, a poser, stump the rabbi about last week, about Hanukkah, about Hellenism, and then we'll get into this week's material too. Oh, everybody's so shy. Come on, Devin, you're always good. Jamie's always good for something. All right,
I got nothing tonight, Rabbi.
I'll jump in.
I
Okay,
appreciate the thought, though.
okay. Um, now, um, well, let me put it this way. I've thought a lot about this. Um, you don't know me that well. You know I'm a cool rabbi and all that, and I'm very interfaith oriented. Um, Number one, um, since my professional life, not when I was a kid, like a lot of us when we were Jewish kids, um, had a lot of uh, baggage. There is a lot of baggage between Jews and Christians about uh, the religious conflicts and things like that. So, like a lot of you, maybe my generation will, my age will show, is I grew up in an era where the teachers would everybody gave away Christmas cards, and everybody teachers would ask, what are you getting for Christmas? What did Santa Claus bring for you? And there were quite a few, not quite a few, but in my first elementary school, there were a few Jewish kids, and as time went on, this was the Valley, San Fernando Valley. As time went on, there were more, but we never knew. I didn't know who was Jewish in my class. Then some of the kids in my public school classes went to the temple that I belonged to. And it grew on me. I learned that what it was to be a minority. But I'll be honest with you. How many of you know what a little tiny Christmas tree looked like? It was a table Christmas tree. It would be something like, you buy it at a store, department store, and you put it on your table. We had one when I was a kid. And when I was in my teens, getting into my Judaism, um, oh, Christine has a question. Christine, I wish you would just speak because sometimes I can't. Yeah. All right. That's a good question. What level of participation is appropriate? Oh, totally, totally. You're here in the synagogue. You participate. Hanukkah is a fun. Um, Anyway, even if you were just coming to high holidays, you participate. I did have, but I'm going to finish my point. But you guys, some of you met Herbert, the guy from L.A. Uh, who grew up in El Salvador, and he's been on this journey with me for almost 20 years, maybe more like 25. And I mean, we stayed in touch, we lost touch with, and now I finally got him to go to a synagogue in Downey, which has a rabbi from Argentina. So it's he's getting some Latino thing. And so I sent him to the synagogue. I said, go to the synagogue. And I said, Herbert, do you have a talit? He says, yes. So he brought his talit, and the rabbi, who is a friend of mine also, Rabbi Danny Melman, who was ordained in Argentina, says, you can't wear that until you're Jewish. So I said, Herbert, he's right. I think it's a nice thing to wear a talit. You're learning. I put tefillin on him one day back when I was living in LA. So, Christina, there are things that it would be appropriate to do when you're Jewish, but you're also in the learning process. So I guess the answer is in a synagogue context, if let's say lighting the candles, opening the ark, well, even opening the ark is doable, but carrying the Torah, not because you're impure as a currently Gentile person, but it's part of the Jewish tradition. You're part of the community. So we had the example of Simchat Torah. Trying to give an answer without getting into too much uncomfortable territory. You carry the Torah around on the holiday of Simchat Torah. So I came up with a suggestion that, let's say Noam's mother is not mother-in-law is not Jewish, or someone like that. So give them the little baby Torah, the kids' Torah to carry. In any event, Hanukkah is different. It's a secular, I mean, it's a religious holiday, but it's one of those, I said last week, a post-biblical holiday. Saying the blessing, Asher Kitchanu Mitzvotav, thank you, God, for giving us the commandment. Well, when you become Jewish, you are saying, I'm commanded. So the answer in general is nobody's going to be offended by you coming to the synagogue, participating. And I say this all the time, participate to the extent that you want to. But always ask the rabbi. Like I say, Sam and Emily, I'm suggesting they go to a more traditional shul, to see what it's like. So if you go to a conservative or even an Orthodox synagogue, ask somebody what's appropriate. The same thing would apply if you're a woman and you say, I want to let's say you are Jewish, I want to put on a talit. So there's a lot of synagogues where women wear talitot, taluses, same thing. This is my it's just a scarf. My other scarf's in the car. And by the way, I don't care about the color. I like all kinds of colors. So, but Christina's question is a good one in a way, because some of tonight's session on the schism is difficult. It's very hard because we all have the baggage of the last 2,000 years and whatever we grew up with. So what I was starting to say is, I'm in elementary school, and those years, this is the 1960s, they maybe sang one Hanukkah song, right? By the time I was in the 6th grade, I think, oh Hanukkah, come light the menorah. We live in a much more multicultural world today. Not only people of different colors and different racial backgrounds, people of international, there's a kid from Singapore and a kid from Taiwan, and a lot of teachers will put things on the bulletin board, international things. That was not the case when I was growing up. So I started to say, I'm in my teens now, and I'm just giving this as a funny story. And I'm becoming more Jewish, right? I'm maybe 15 years old, and I start criticizing Mom and Dad. Why did we have a Christmas tree when I was a kid? I'm not a little guy. And by the way, my mother, her sister, Aunt Lois, they were both Jewish. They both grew up in New York. This is the whole scene. Lois married a non-Jewish guy, Chet, my uncle Chet, who was not religious, but he was it was a big man on campus. He was an athlete. I remember he had a Wallace sticker on his pickup truck, and he would go hunting. So we would go to Fullerton, which is Orange County, for Christmas with Aunt Lois and Uncle Chet and their 2 daughters, my cousins, Eileen and Diane, both of whom, Mom's Jewish. They were Jewish. They were not raised with anything. So I'm saying I grew up with this consciousness that Mom and Dad, the Valley, New York people were Jewish, and people who lived in Orange County, and by extension, people who lived in Cheyenne and Montana, all were Gentile. So I said, Mom, why did we have a Christmas tree? And she says, because you asked for it. Because I bugged my parents. Because, again, the pressure of all of that, growing up as a kid, first of all, I saw a Christmas tree in their home, Aunt Lois's home, even though I didn't realize Aunt Lois was Jewish, but she's my mom's sister. Okay, Aunt Lois. But this all happened through my teenage years into college and then beyond. By the time I was in college, I was completely a Jew. I was becoming more observant. Okay, Jessica asked, why, as a religious Jew, do you celebrate non-Jewish holidays now? No, but not just because I'm a rabbi. Wow, look at that. That's an avatar for that's got to be Jamie. That's cute. Um, and that do you guys see what I sent you? I sent you some material about that also. So we'll get to that. Why is it inappropriate for Jews to celebrate Christmas by themselves? If you have a relative, you have an aunt, you have if you're let's say, I'm not going to put her on the spot, but let's say Emily, you guys probably, if you go to your in-laws to her parents' house, then you celebrate Christmas with them. And that's what we'll get to this, but that's what is the appropriate way um, to commemorate what has become a secular part of American culture, right? um, Giving presents. So a lot of us, if you work in a setting, in an office or something, they're going to have Christmas parties. So it's just I mean, what is Christmas today in America for most Jews, most Americans? It is simply, I'm sorry, I had something in my mouth there. It is something, a fun secular thing. But tonight's topic is uncomfortable. That's what I wanted to get back to saying. Um, as a rabbi and as um, a strong, progressive, interfaith-oriented person, I not only, I'm not going to just say like lip service. I honor Christianity. I have many friends in, here actually. I'm closer with some of the ministers here in town than I am with my rabbi friends in Denver, simply because we see each other. I am closer with those who are, shall we say, liberal, right? Or I don't use that word politically, but if they accept me, I accept them. We have good conversations. I don't know a single minister in Cheyenne that there is, and this is a longer discussion, but we have the Cheyenne Interfaith Council, which began years ago as a Christian group, and then they said, let's invite the rabbis, and they changed the name from whatever it used to be called to an interfaith council. Then they invited the Muslims, and we have Buddhists. We have a whole group of people. There's another two groups in town that are strictly Christian minister groups. And they don't, simply because they want to be able to talk with the others about, Christianity and so on. Then there's a black group in town that's nice. I'm trying to get the two groups together. I go to the Dr. King celebration at one of the churches, Redeemer, on I believe it's on 13th Street. Anyway, I don't like to think about how Cheyenne is changing and making progress, but I'm used to a very, very interfaith oriented style. Same thing happened in the prison. Even though you think it's a prison, we had very interfaith oriented programming. There also was Christian programming and Jewish programming. And so I model, and I think you guys know this already, I model an open door. If you come to the Passover Seder, we invite the Christian community there. I mean, not thousands of people, but often, especially people from Highland Presbyterian come, from the Unitarian Church. So like we get about 20% of the group that comes are people who are curious about Passover and the Seder. And so I said all that. Now, the second thing I want to say is, and it's not just to excuse this, but I want to say this is difficult material to discuss. We're talking about the schism, the split of these two groups. The second thing I want to say is I am pretty unusual, but not as unusual, as strange as you might think. I know a lot of rabbis who not only honor their Christian colleagues, but will go to a church and speak at a church. I'm saying I've gotten past all the paranoia and fear that I grew up with. I've even been to more fundamentalist groups. And, again, maybe I have a certain amount of gravitas, right? Because I have the title rabbi. Oh, rabbi, how do you do, rabbi? But I've spoken at churches and mosques and so on. So I'll go further. It might surprise some of you. I've read the New Testament. I've studied the books. I don't think the New Testament is the only book to understand who Jesus might have been. And yes, thank you, Stephanie. The only by the way, Thanksgiving is a very good model of a holiday. Mordecai Kaplan, who was the founder of this branch of Judaism, used to say that Thanksgiving was a great example of American civil religion. Civil religion, that he loved the idea of people coming together to celebrate. Now today we might talk more about the indigenous peoples and so on, but so there is liturgy found in Jewish prayer books. What do you want to read about on Thanksgiving? And if had I done a gathering, I would have read some of those, Psalms and things like that. So all I want to say is when we start this study today, it is with the utmost respect. And the last thing is, I said this before, is it's hard to go back in time to a time when there was a Judean country, one people, the Judeans, the Jews, living under Roman oppression, as we talked about. Yes, Stephanie wrote, yes, Thanksgiving is modeled on Sukkot to a large extent. And so we have those 2,000 years of oppression, persecution, killing, forced conversions, horrible economic anti-Semitism, which we're going to be studying. So remember, we're going this semester, if you want to call it that, we're going up to the end of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages and the early modern period are fraught with baggage, not just persecution, but it's almost like we have to go back through all that stuff to get to a place of brotherhood and sisterhood. Having said all that, let's embark on this study. Okay. Did you guys, I'm just going to have to hit everything. Did anybody get to watch any of the movies? No? Yes? No, I mean, not the Hanukkah one. That's great. But okay. So here is what I sent you, and I recommend it. I'm going to hit Abba Eben just for a minute. And so, who was it? Somebody last week said they liked the Abba Eben thing. Boom, boom. There we go. Not going to hit it all, just some of it.
Rome,
hang
the
on.
ruler of nations.
Share. And I don't know if the same thing could happen last week. Maybe it'll work well, maybe it won't. No, there. Herbert.
By the 1st century of the present era, all the lands of the Mediterranean had been brought together in the greatest political and military enterprise the world had ever known.
It's a little bit blurry, but okay.
The military power of Rome
sounds like Star Trek. Bum, 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 bum. That kind of militant thing.
Shaped the governments, the nations, and the peoples of its empire into a single international order. 100 different traditions and cultures were brought together in this vast experiment of rule. Its effect on the Jews, its effect on all peoples, would be profound. No one could have foreseen the long-range impact of the great Roman conquest, least of all the Romans themselves.
The world, as all men had known it, was coming to an end, brought to a close in part by the power of Rome. The centuries that lay ahead would bring with them dramatic change. Rome would not cause that change. Rome itself would be swept up by it, helpless in the face of forces greater than its own.
Okay,
But the
Abba,
vast
we'll let you go. So that, by the way, is the aqueduct. It's in Caesarea or Caesarea. So, like we talked about last week, remember the Greeks bring the Greek culture and some of the architecture. The Romans, and the Romans, we all studied this in elementary and or junior high and high school. The Romans just copied the Greeks, but they brought in the aqueducts, the government, and certainly the oppression. Okay, so
And a port on the coast of the Mediterranean,
this is
or a remote outpost of trade in the desert of what is now Morocco. The ancient world had never known a people quite like the Jews. A book, the Bible, was at the center of their worship. A book and a body of law.
remember that this is different than the current one, the civilization, the history of the Jews. They put in actors to play these roles. Abba Ibn was a very good lecturer, so you're not going to find real people, but he picks people that look like the ancient people, and so here is these are
God.
the Yemenite Jews of today.
Their lives were bound up in their religion in their lives. Dio Cassius, the Roman historian, commented,
They are distinguished from the rest of humanity in practically every detail of their lives, but especially in that they refuse to honor any of the usual gods and adore one particular divinity with great ardor and worship him in the most extravagant fashion.
the exclusive worship of one universal God. The idea was a novelty. The Jews, scattered as they were, became emissaries for this new view.
By the way, if you haven't seen one, that is a Yemenite style Torah scroll. We had a service with Noam when he was showing slides. They, instead of putting it on a rolling scroll with two pieces of wood, it's one single scroll inside of a beautiful metal container because it's easy to carry. Anyway, we're not going to be able to watch all of this, but and that, by the way, here's a good one. This is what an old menorah might have looked like.
Customs were being influenced by Jewish customs, beliefs by Jewish beliefs. The city of ancient Rome. It was a metropolis of almost modern proportions. 1 million people lived in its tenements and palaces. Its teeming streets and marketplaces were a magnet that drew people from all over the Mediterranean. The city embraced them all, tolerating the customs and gods of 100 foreign peoples. Gods, demigods, spirits, centaurs, and heroes. Roman religion was a blend of folklore and reverence.
Okay,
in doing so.
So remember what I talked about last week, and I'm going to introduce you to a new term tonight: syncretism. Syncretism. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's the art of bringing together two different religions and combining them. Into this realm, remember that by this time, by somewhere around 60 BC, CE possibly, or even earlier, the Bible was translated into Greek in Alexandria. So we always talk about how they affect us. We affected them. I've told you the story. You guys, I'll go off the stop share. You remember the story of a man? Yes, Stephanie, we will do both. There is a story in the Talmud that a man, a Greek or someone like that, comes to two different rabbis and says, I will convert to your faith if you can tell me what it means, what it stands for. Well, I stand on one foot. Well, Shammai is very conservative and also was a hardworking carpenter, and he doesn't have time for this bozo. So he says he hits him with a rod or a measuring rod, and he said, "Get out of my shop, you impolite man." Man goes to Rabbi Hillel. Remember the classic Hillel and Shammai. Hillel's the more congenial type, and but he doesn't have to work for a living. I mean, poor Shammai always gets a bad rep. And Hillel says, sure, stand on your foot. And you remember the line, anything you would not let somebody do to you, do not do to anyone else. The reverse of what was later put in Jesus' mouth, do unto others. It's a very classic kind of statement of ethics. Do anything you wouldn't want to yourself. Your neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself, basically. So then he says to the man, the rest is commentary, now go and study. According to tradition, we don't know who the man was. That man actually did convert to Judaism. What does it say? There were many people, this is very important to understanding the Christian movement, the early movement. There were many people who were tired of the old Greek and Roman way. You had a bad day, you lost your goats, or your wife died. That's because you didn't worship Athena, or you didn't do this. So very, very not elementary, but it was a very dried, hard and fast rule. And Judaism began to teach this idea that there was a loving God that created the whole world, that cared about everybody, and monotheism was an idea that was growing. But let's say you're a Jewish woman living in Tarsus, which is where Paul came from, Saul of Tarsus, also known as St. Paul, or Ephesus, which is in Turkey, or in Greece, or even in the Galilee, and your husband is Greek or whatever. Just like today, we have intermarriages, but we didn't have anything known as Reformed Judaism or, interfaith marriages just were not done. So, but your guy is curious, or the woman, they want to learn more about this faith. And then you say, but they go to a rabbi, let's say, like this man in the story, and you say, well, you have to be circumcised. You can't eat pork. By the way, you have to be faithful to your wife. What? All sorts of things. So we will see how in some ways, again, remember what I said at the beginning, I'm not criticizing Christianity, but in some ways, the way that Paul began to approach things made it more palatable for these kind of people. You say, you can join our group and you don't have to get circumcised. That's, again, a difference between him and the early Jerusalem church. So let's continue a little bit of the video. So I just want to see if I can hit it again. Just
violating
that
their
section.
own sacred customs. Rome was powerless to change their ways, powerless except by force of arms. But the issue seemed a minor matter, a question of custom and belief. And so the Roman government granted them the right to be different. With official toleration came increasing acceptance of Jewish ideas as well. Many throughout the empire were attracted by Jewish beliefs. Many abandoned their gods, turned their backs on custom, and began to worship the one God of the Jews. By the middle of the 1st century, certain Romans were outraged by the continuing spread of Judaism. Seneca, the orator and philosopher, could write,
"The practices of this villainous nation have so prevailed that they are adopted by people everywhere. The vanquished have made laws for the conquerors."
Over the first 2 centuries of this era, the number of conversions to Judaism increased. The ground was laid for an upheaval in the beliefs of the Western world. Those who followed the teachings of Jesus
Going on a little
were
further.
known among other Jews as Nazarenes. In the beginning, the Nazarene sect was completely Jewish. As a noted scholar has commented,
Its earliest adherents were synagogue-going Jews or synagogue-going Gentiles. Apart from their belief in Jesus as the Messiah, there was nothing to distinguish them from their fellow congregants in the synagogue. Their ethics were Jewish. Their Messiah was a Jew. All their leaders were Jews. The temple in Jerusalem was still the center of their worship.
the Nazarenes were one among many Jewish sects whose fervent beliefs agitated the land of Judea in those years. But their influence was to reach far beyond the limits of this small land.
And here
I'm a
comes Paul.
Born at Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in Jerusalem and educated according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers.
These are the words of Saul, better known to history as St. Paul the Apostle. He and others of his group carried the message of Jesus to the cities of Greece and Asia Minor, and to Rome. In the thousands of miles of traveling, Paul visited Jewish communities, tirelessly spreading the message of the Messiah who had come. From Antioch to Thessalonica, from Corinth to the great port city of Ephesus in what is now Turkey.
And these are all documented in the Gospels,
Where
his
fields
journeys.
of grass now lie, once there was a harbor crowded with ships. The road that once carried cartloads of produce to and from the docks now stands empty.
All right, we have to skip a little bit.
Although his had been a Jewish sect, Paul welcomed new followers without having them convert to Judaism. By not imposing the Jewish laws, Paul made it easier for thousands in this center of commerce, artistry, and learning to turn to the worship of the one God. So many converts did he make in Ephesus and other cities that local citizens thought that their traditional gods were being abandoned. In this theater, about the year 55, an excited crowd gathered to protest the spread of the new sect. A man named Demetrius stood before them, a jeweler who built statues to the goddess Artemis. Fearing that the new religion would destroy his livelihood, he called upon his audience to attack the Nazarenes. There was a near riot, put down finally by government officials. Paul was forced to leave the city. He may have gone, but he left behind a Nazarene sect, firmly rooted in the Greek.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it. Watch this one on your own. And I'm also going to suggest, if you want to have a little more background, I mean, I'm big into documentaries and PBS specials. So I think I told some of you years ago when I was in LA, Long Beach, near LA, I got a position as an adjunct professor teaching at a community college. And I was hired to teach the Western religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I started showing there a film from Jesus to Christ. And as I said, I spoke recently at PBS, 4 parts. Like everything else these days, you don't have to go buy it. You can find it on YouTube. It's available. Part 1 deals with the Jesus movement or Jesus life himself, or whatever they know. And the people that they're interviewing, again, it's not actors, but the talking heads include a Jewish professor from Brown, a Jewish, another guy, a black guy who was a professor at, I think it was Boston University, and an Irish guy that's very fun to listen to, kind of humorous. I remember the black guy says, you got to realize that Jesus was growing up in the Galilee, which was the Berkeley of his time. So he's comparing it to hippie haven. I mean, so anyway, so the part 1 deals with what do we know about him and his life? And he was a Jew. He lived his life as a Jewish guy, and he challenged the authorities at the time, and he was crucified or killed. If we know if that's true, we don't know that it's literally true because all we know is the accounts from the Gospels, which were written 200 years later. Come on, okay. Then the second part of the film deals with Paul, which they just got into, and the third part, I believe, deals with the growth of the movement. And the part 4 is really where the rubber hits the road. That's when, in around 300, when Constantine converts to the whole kingdom to Christianity. Okay, so and that's one of the things I sent you. So let's review the movements. Am I boring you guys? All right, is this? I mean, I'll open the questions, but I'm saying we're doing history a little bit. Remember, that's the topic. Okay, where were we? This is the material I sent you, so I'm gonna hit it again. This one, this slide on the is it the short one? Jewish law? No, short one here. Oh, New Testament sects. Okay, sex lies and Judaism. This slide, which is from the classes I used to teach, it really lays it out again. So what are we talking about? We're talking about these 4 groups, maybe 5, who are coexisting at the same time. They are, remember from last week, the Sadducees, who are the temple dudes, the Kohanim, as we call them today, the priests. They are wealthier, they are conservative, they are both collaborators with the Romans, but also, frankly, they're living under the Romans. They got to survive. As I showed you last week, the Roman guard station was right on top of the temple. So they just looked down. Hey, I see there's a rebellion down there, and they would kill people. The Sadducees, as you remember, also did not believe in afterlife. They accepted only the written Torah. And meanwhile, the Pharisees, which we know as rabbis, are growing as a group of interpreters. That's what Pharisee means. They're people who read the Torah and interpret it, and they are the people who give us to fill in the rules of kashrut. And that's how, as I told you last time or 2 weeks ago, the Mishnah is being developed, the oral law. So they say there's the written law, and then there's the oral law, which we are interpreting, and they're both valid. Well, you know what happened, of course, when the temple is destroyed. The poor Sadducees are out of work. They're wandering around. Hey, can you spare a dime? Oh, but you're in nice clothes. Oh, I was a priest in the temple. I mean, not literally, but they had nothing to do. And they weren't as learned as the Pharisees were either. Another thing that's, as I said, is different is the belief in afterlife, which I talked about last week with Hanukkah a little bit. So all these things are slowly changing. So you could say that, forgive me, I'm just trying to make a comparison. The Pharisees are the Democrats, and the Sadducees are the really conservative Republicans of their time. But the temple's gone. The third group, which remember we talked about, was the so-called Essenes. I don't like the term because it's not really correct. More like the Qumran sect. Qumran is the place. So these are the hippies of their time. I don't even call them hippies, but the people who said, go to the desert, be communing with God. They were the mystics. They developed the whole traditions of meditation and prayer, and they lived a pure lifestyle. And I told you some of them were celibate, some of them were married, and among them is this dude called Yochanan the Mikveh Man. Now, he didn't live down there, but Yochanan the Mikveh Man started roaming the Judean desert, and he also would take people, into the, in a very warm, friendly way. He's a Jewish guy. He's a mystic. Says, let's go wade in the water, right? So a mikveh, that's what a mikveh is. So he was very charismatic, and one of the people he influenced was Jesus, according to what they talk about. So that's the group that is, the sons of light versus the sons of darkness, and they were killed. They all died out, or they may have joined up. The fourth group that we know about is the Zealots. Did anybody see The Life of Brian? I'm a big Monty Python fan. You got to watch it just to see. The Life of Brian is the story of this fictional guy. First the Pythons did um, a parody on King Arthur and the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is great. And then they said, well, what are we going to do now? And they went to Bahamas and they started studying. Well, what can we do next? Let's do the Jesus story. Well, the Anglican Church was very offended and they boycotted the movie. And here in America, it was boycotted. It was not done to be a put down on Jesus. It's just they imagined, what if there was this dude named Brian who's played by Graham Chapman, and everybody keeps telling him he's the Messiah. So in the movie, there's a great scene where there's like 4 or 5 of them sitting around, and Brian comes up to them and says, I want to join your group. Who are you? And it's again like the spoof of the 60s. So we all the Judeans for liberation from Rome, and then well, who are those guys over there? Oh no, we don't talk to them. They are the Judean Liberation Front. So these different groups of zealots. So it's really quite accurate, maybe not silly like that. The zealots there was a name, I gave you the name, the Sikari. It's in Polushkin's book. Sikari means daggers. They were dagger people. They were the Jewish, I don't even want to say Black Panthers, because the Black Panthers were basically good folks, but the Weathermen, right? If anybody, maybe I'm really aging myself. The Weathermen were not they were part of the SDS, but they blew up people's homes, and so these were the anti-Roman revolutionaries, even to the point where I was talking to Herbert, they were the Sandinistas. They would kill Jewish collaborators. And so those are the people, the zealots, the Sikari, were the people that started the revolution, the rebellion against Rome in 66. Horrible. I mean, again, it was a horrible time. So then we have our fifth group, and that was what they said. I would parallel, I just want to say this as respectfully as I can. These are not Christians the way we know Christian today. They were Jews or non-Jews. Remember, here we got Mark, whose Hebrew name is Mordechai. Mark is a Jew. Matthew, Mattijahu, he's a Jew. John, Yochanan, he was a Jew. These are the 4 biggest gospels. And they were, part of the early church. Luke is not a Jew, Lucas. And then Saul of Tarsus. So what begins to happen is, the best comparison I would give is the Hasidic movement, which we'll look at when we get into the 1800s, or the Reform movement, okay? Today, we know that there are Jews who are very schismatic, right? I believe this, you believe that. Oh, but it's okay. You're a good Jew. Okay, you don't believe this, I don't believe that. So, like Chabad. But the Hasidic movement, when it began in Europe, in the Ukraine, the rabbis would put harems on each other, excommunications. There would people in a single village would say, your butcher isn't kosher enough, or your butcher we don't want to go to your synagogue. So in the same way, that's what Eben was talking about. The early Nazarenes were, if you can imagine this, were Jewish folks, or some non-Jews, who practiced much of what we now think of as Judaism, but with the added feature of he was the Messiah. Okay, so then he's put to death. And what happens? We can imagine, whether it's Passover or not, we can imagine that he's put to death, and there is a need for some sort of emotional catharsis. Maybe it was part of God's plan, And remember, and again, this is pictured in in The Life of Brian too. Remember, there were many thousands of people who claimed to be the Jewish Messiah, to lead the people, to destroy Rome, or to free us from the Romans. What was a Jewish Messiah? A Jewish Messiah was someone appointed or anointed by God to bring peace. So in that sense, of course, you could ask the question, did Jesus ever say he was the Messiah or a Messiah? Maybe he did. But did he ever claim to be God? No. Did he ever claim to be the Son of God? No. Oh, what's that? Even now, Jessica, what?
I was saying even now, there's people that come forth and say that they're the Messiah.
Yes. Well,
Aside from Jesus, or say they're reincarnate of Jesus.
I know. And we'll get to a very strange occurrence in the 1600s. There was a whole series of false messiahs. There was a guy from Turkey who claimed to be the Jewish Messiah, and he had a great promotional guy. And people, in Poland, went up to their rooftops and waited to be, flown to Israel. And of course, they were disappointed. So we have this history in our community of don't believe anybody in a false Messiah. Okay. So I wasn't there. Oh, look, that's the Messiah right there. Look at that kid. That's good. Hi. Is it a boy or girl? That's a girl, right?
Boy.
It's a boy.
That's a boy. Oh,
Malachi.
okay. Oh, it's Malachi. Oh, okay. Hi, Chris. And by the way, that's a very Jewish thing to say. Maybe he's the Messiah. Because we say that as a wistful kind of maybe. This person has a mission to accomplish. I would say it this way: so maybe we are all the Messiah. All right, but here's what the rubber hits the road with the destruction of the temple, and then the first retaliation of the Romans, destroying the temple, and then the second rebellion, 135, which we talked about, the Bar Kokhba rebellion. By that time, 135, by that time, there are already this two sects. There's a lot of commercials, right Twix and left Twix, two brothers have the factories. So, and by the way, this will get me to something that is a little unpleasant, which I don't want to do, but I'm going to do it just peripherally. Can we turn back the clock and imagine a time when there were Jewish believers in Jesus as the Messiah? No, we can't. The bottom line is, once the divorce has been finalized, I hate to put it that way, some people fall in love with somebody, well, let's get back together, honey. That's different. But I said before, the 2,000 years of persecution and separation are so severe, and they go their separate ways. But I won't do this today. I'll talk about it when we get to that later in the semester next year. But in 1970s, in order to try to convert Jews, just so you understand, in order to continue this never-ending, the Rabbi Halfon is very tolerant. I am not very tolerant of missionaries. In order to of certain kind of missionaries, in order to change they used to have groups of people, the American Board of Baptist Missions to the Jews, and they would have tractates and people on street corners, repent, repent, repent. Finally, one guy whose name was Marty Rosen said, I'm going to be calling myself Moshe Rosen, 1970s. And he says, we have mothers against drunk driving, or mothers against the war, or students for peace, this for that, this for that. So why don't we call it Jews for Jesus? And I grew up at UCLA. We were on Bruin Walk, which is this long, walkway through the middle of the campus. And they would have the Hare Krishnas and the Persians and the Palestinians and the Jews and the Black Panther kids and the Jews for Jesus. And they're handing out pamphlets. And what Moshe Rosen and other people did was they convinced the Baptist missionaries to put money into this project. And they created this false idea that you could be that you could be a completed Jew. So I say that only because if you could turn the clock back to that time, they were, I guess the best thing could say is, mom and dad had a home together, but dad went that way and mom went that way. Okay, back to the history stuff. By in the various films that we see and in the material that I sent you, let me see if I have more stuff on the timeline here. Oh, and by the end of the first millennium, 100 or so, end of the first century, there is no going back, and there is you guys remember, I'm not a big expert on this, but the various councils of the various early church fathers decided they had to have a decision made. Was Jesus man or was he demigod? Now, here's where I introduce this term for you. Syncretism. It's a fancy term for blending or combining two faiths. But frankly, syncretism is not legit. It happens, but it doesn't mean, hey, I have friends who manage to have interfaith marriages. This is different. The dominant culture takes over, but the dominated culture says, we're going to do this in a way that makes it look legitimate. The best example I can give from the Jewish point of view is what I said before. Oh, that's not a Christmas tree, that's a Hanukkah bush. How many of you have at least heard of Haiti, or Cuba, or Brazil? I know Brazil better, so I'll talk about that. Many slaves were brought over from the Ivory Coast and various other nations. In America, I hate to say this, I'm sorry if it hurts anybody's feelings. The American slavery movement was, it was horrible, it was harsh, and they literally, took people away from everything. This, like the movie in Roots, the guy is asked says, what is your name? Kunta Kinte. No, and they keep whipping him until he, says, no, my name is Kunta Kinte. So this destruction of the culture was completely, that's why many early slaves adopted Christianity, is a need for this. And it was like, oh, hey, they're Christians now. But in Brazil and other countries in South America, it was the same but different. The slaves were treated horribly, but for some reason, they kept some of their cultural roots. Why do I say that? So Yoruba is a tradition mainly from Nigeria, and so I've studied this stuff. And so the Orishas are the various demigods of the Yoruba tradition. So we have Jango, the warrior god, and we have his mother, Yemanja, the goddess of the sea. Okay, so you go to Brazil, and you have people who go to church on Sunday morning, but on Sunday night, they go to a candomblé, the macumba. It's called macumba in Brazil. It's called vodun in Haiti. It's not a contradiction for some of them. And we're not talking about devil worship here. We're just talking about a folk tradition going all the way back to Africa. But guess what they do? Again, I'm not criticizing them. I'm saying for them, they managed to make it work. They will say, this statue of Mary is the goddess Yemanja. But it's Mary. No, it's Yemanja. And people literally will come down from the mountains on New Year's Eve. It's a festival of the goddess of the sea. And so, but they might go to church the next day. It's okay. Now, the Jewish version of that was the Hanukkah bush. Guess what? You all know this. So I'm sorry to break anybody. What is a Christmas tree? It's a Teutonic Yule tree, from the old pagan traditions. So I mean, I don't want to turn this into a history lesson. Do you know that there are churches, or there were sites all over Europe, in England and in Norway, which were sites of pagans? I'm not talking about bad witches, just pagan holy sites. And then the church would come in and say, well, we're taking this over, and now it is a church. I mean, I gotta blow your minds now. Guess who Santa Claus was? Santa Claus was a Turkish shaman. He was a shaman that was a kind of a charismatic guy who would give presents to children, and they turned him into a saint. So that's what you do when you do syncretism. Now, this is where it really starts to, not sound unpleasant, but Judaism is a monotheistic religion with one God that is invisible, indivisible, beyond our understanding, and is not, and would never come to earth and have sex with somebody. But in the Greek religion, the gods always did that, especially Zeus got around a lot, right? Zeus and Leda and so on. So you're talking, again, this is hard to wrap your head around. If you are a Paul or someone like Paul, and you're trying to explain who Jesus is to a pagan or to the non-Jewish spouse of a highly assimilated Jew, right, in Turkey. Oh, he's the son of God. Oh, you mean like Hercules? So, and here's where, as I say, it gets uncomfortable. I will not say this to my Christian colleagues. Some of them will say it to me. In some ways, the way that Christianity came about was a syncretistic blend of paganism and Judaism. In other words, the idea that a man could die and come back to life. I mean, Judaism did have beliefs in that, but those mythologies were all over the Middle East. There was a god in the Greek tradition, Dumuzi. That's how we get the Hebrew month of Tammuz. And he would die every summer and would come back to life in the fall, right? So I don't know how to explain it any better than that, is that this early version of the Cristiano, and he says it in the movie. I'll just the last thing I'll say on that is, so the Greeks or the Romans are looking at these two peoples and say, they're both Jewish sects, if you want to call them that, and they say, oh, who are those people with the long beards and the won't eat pork? Oh, those are the Judai. Oh, okay. So who are those other people who are also, practicing some Jewish customs, but they keep talking about this guy? Oh, those are the Christianoi. So that's how the term gets around. What does the term Christ mean? Mashiach. All right. So one more uncomfortable, not uncomfortable, but one more piece of, here we go. Let's see if I can just hit it here by sharing it while I'm doing it. Who's got a question on the history stuff? Yeah, I'm helping this. I realize I can open a file right in front of you. Okay, New Testament sects, Jewish versus Catholic beliefs. This is heavy. Is it showing up? A little too big. Whoops. Yeah. This was something I sent you. This is from the class. It is granted, I'll grant you that it is Catholic versus Jewish. You know this, most of you already. I'm sorry, it's a little bit off. I can't change it right now. I scanned it. So the idea,
Rabbi, sorry.
Yeah.
We can't see the new form that popped up.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Oh, I know what happened. I was sharing it while I was. Now I see it. Okay. Well, don't nod your head. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is, with all due respect, this is how it finally came about by the Middle Ages. This doesn't mean, this is comparing Catholic to Jewish, not liberal, groovy Protestants. But the idea of three beings, divine beings, is completely anathema to Judaism. You know that already, all right? Now, having said that, you know that in Kabbalah, you will see this. We do talk about different faces of God or different names for God, but God is one. Just like saying, I can call, didn't I do that to you, Sam? Last week I said, Sammy, Shmuel, Yitzchak, and he said, oh, my middle name is Yitzchak. You know, my name is Moshe, but I sometimes like to be called Moshe. Okay, yeah. Oh, Devin, what prophecies did the Messiah of the? Well, for one thing, the Jewish Messiah, Devin, was a man who was going to militarily or otherwise free the Jews from the Romans. And in some ways, you know, that's what some Christians will say. Well, look, he did. It just took him, 300 years. but all the things that were predicted for a Messiah to do, none of them happened during Jesus' lifetime. But also, the idea of the Messiah changes. The Christian view of the Messiah is not a man or a person who's fighting for peace and prosperity and for safety, but a man who's, there to save you. Another thing is the whole birth thing, the incarnation. Part of the Greek tradition that Jesus was conceived through whatever, the Holy Ghost. So therefore, has to be immaculate conception. Mary was probably, if she existed, Mary was probably either raped or had sex with either a Jewish man who ran away or was taken in the army or killed, or it could have been a Roman. And we know that because poor Jesus has no father. And so Joseph adopts him. Remember, James is his stepbrother. Original sin. This is a huge, huge difference. Adam and Eve. Okay, it's a nice story. It's an interesting story. Maybe you could make the case the rabbis in their time did sort of believe that there was this idea that we were, we had this beautiful place, we lost it, we failed, and now we have to make do with life. But in no way, I mean, how could there's Malachi, right? And Malachi's a beautiful kid. Nobody inherits the sin of previous generations. I'll get to chat in just a second. So they had to come up with this idea that everyone has to believe through Jesus, right? Grace, the interesting thing about grace. Let's see what the chat is going on. Okay. Oh yes, scholars. Yeah, thank you. Jamie wrote that Tiberius Pontero. That's interesting. And Christina writes, they put her theoretical age as likely early teens. Yeah, I mean, girls would, this would routinely happen. Nevertheless, all we know is that as these two groups separate, they develop different notions. Let's look at baptism. I mentioned Mr. Yochanan, the mikvah man. I love a mikvah. Each of you, if you choose to become a Jew, will go into the mikvah. It's a beautiful spiritual experience. You are, quote unquote, reborn. You go in as a non-Jew, you come out as a Jew, you feel a sense of newness, but it's not about purging away original sin. So they changed the whole idea of what the mikvah meant. By the way, I told you, I mentioned my class I used to teach in Orange County. So is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Do you know that in Islam, they also have a tradition of immersion into a pool? You immerse your hands, your eyes, your body, not your whole body, before prayer. And they have a pool right nearby the Mosque of Omar. And if you really, are deeply into it, you can immerse totally into a pool. So the question on the final exam was, a Jew, a Muslim, and a Christian are all shipwrecked on Gilligan's Island. what do they do about water? You know, how do they treat? So the Jew goes to the mikveh once a week before Shabbat, because the pious Hasidic Jew. The Muslim goes to the water, goes to the I said mikveh, goes to the into the water, you know, whenever he's going to pray to purify himself, and the Christian goes whenever he wants to. But they all believe in the same idea. And if I could just go off on a limb here, do you know the sweat lodge in the Indian tradition is the similar thing, except instead of purifying through water, you purify through fire. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so there is no original sin in Judaism. There is no sacred images in Judaism. Now, I know and you know that many synagogues, including our own, have stained glass windows. There was a time when that was not accepted. I remember I once was leading services in LA, and I put a picture of Reb Zalman up in front of the congregation, and somebody got livid. You shouldn't do that, even if he's a Rebbe, and he was still alive. So because you're putting a graven image. Jews do not believe in graven images. So, but even if we do have, you know, and this goes all the way back to the Roman times, they did have synagogues with mosaic floors. I got to watch the time here. What do we got? 8:05. So, but basically, if you go to a church, you're going to see, you know, even in a Protestant church, you'll see images of the saints with little halos on their heads. Okay, communion. All right, what is communion? You all know that already. It came out of the Passover Seder. So I could picture Jesus at his Seder. Yes, Jessica, we won't. God gave Moses but God didn't give Moses a statue. He did. You're talking about the what do you call it? The seraph. Yeah, it was not
Yeah,
for work.
the
Yeah,
pastor had said something about like a serpent or
a
something on
serpent. Yes, it
and
was. Yeah, hold this up and people will be cured. You know,
yeah,
some kind. Yeah, but it was not an idol. I mean, by idolatry in Judaism was so anathema that when, again, we're talking about syncretism, one of the things about the Christian way is to show this. I mean, I don't have a problem. I have no problem with any of their images, but it's much easier to say this is a cross, this is a Jewish star, than a simple walking and you see the guy hanging there. You know, it's just gross. But I've been to many Catholic hospitals. All right, another thing about differences. And I know you guys know this, but this is very important to like think about the differences. Where do you go after you die? Well, Jews don't do that quite literally, but we all get to an afterlife, whatever that might mean. There is no literal belief in hell. Yes, there was in the Middle Ages. Jews did have this idea of some kind of an underworld. And in mysticism, Jewish mysticism, there is an idea that the soul goes on a 12-month journey, right? And while we're praying the Kaddish, but it's not, you know, it's not like you're bad, you're going here, you're good, you're going there. It's just so and the only way out, please, Moshe, or Moshe, they wouldn't say Moshe, I'd say, Moses, I don't want you to go to hell. Please accept Jesus. Give me a break, Jack. You know, so I just have to say, this is a very big difference. The sacraments. Well, we call them mitzvot. We don't call them sacraments. Although, again, I'll tell you a joke. Back in the prison, I had to make sure that I could bring in, it's a prison. I had to make sure I could bring in grape juice and challah and a little cookie for every inmate, right? So I pack them up and I got the warden to sign a memo. I mean, to get anything inside of the prison, you have to have a memo. You could bring an elephant in as long as it's on the memo. So I bring this stuff to the front gate and Officer Bob or After Smith would say, what is this? Oh, here's the memo, or the memo's in your desk. Oh, it's your sacraments. So, you know, the Jewish women would be able to get, you know, a piece of challah. And so but remember, the wine isn't holy. It's just to make the Shabbat holy. When we do the blessing I explain that sometimes to people when we go to where the services in the Oneg. All right, so finishing up on that, you guys got the general idea. They are them and we are us. So now let's turn to this other question that was more popular earlier on. What happens? I really, I don't want to tell you what to do. But I want to preach, but I don't want to tell you what literally you must do. But why is it inappropriate for Jews to have a Christmas tree or to celebrate Christmas in anything more than oh hey Bob? No, I mean I'm past the point. I do not need to say happy holidays. I will say to a Christian friend, Merry Christmas, and they'll say Happy Hanukkah. You know what I'm saying? It's, or they may say even Happy Passover or Happy New Year. We're past a lot of that, but there was a time, maybe this is not so relevant now, but a lot of people who are in interfaith marriages or even not interfaith marriages felt like they had to have something to make their kids happy. Frankly, and I know you guys realize this too, I know we talked about this last week, but let's be real. Hanukkah is an important holiday, but it is not the most important holiday on the Jewish calendar. I mean, every holiday is important, right? But it became important because it's that time of year, and the Adam Sandler song, right? Instead of just one present, we get 8 big nights. So this guy is a Christian guy writing to this was from 1975. So anybody want to read it? Stephanie? No, nobody?
Yeah, I can read it, Rabbi.
All right, it's heavy. I know it's going to be emotional.
I'm just glad you blew it up. Now I can actually read it a little bit better. I'm
Yeah.
getting old. I need glasses.
Okay.
Thank you. You showed me the Christmas tree you placed in your home. You thought I would be flattered and pleased. It is a beautiful tree, carefully set up and painstakingly decorated, but I am neither flattered nor pleased. I am somewhat resentful, a little ashamed, and deeply sorry. To me, a Christian, a tree is a symbol of my most sacred religious holiday. During the Christmas season, it is a constant reminder of the birth of our Lord and Savior. It has become, in our home, the mark of our Christianity during the season of the year when we celebrate the birth of our Christ. I ask myself, what meaning has the tree for you? It cannot be a Christian religious symbol since you've told me often that as a Jew you do not accept Christ. For you, it must then be no more than a pretty decoration. How can I help feeling resentful when you take my sacred religious symbol and make it a mere decoration? And when I hear you refer to it jokingly as a Hanukkah bush, I am both resentful and ashamed. Ashamed for you, for your nervous laugh when you say, for your nervous laugh when you say it, for the look in your eyes that cannot quite hide your hope that I will understand and your fear that I might not. But most of all, I'm sorry for you. You mentioned Hanukkah, and I'm learning a good deal about this holiday. I see some of my Jewish neighbors decorate their homes so beautifully in its honor. I hear their children sing pretty songs and tell the exciting and significant story. I just love latkes. I am sorry that all this is so strange and foreign to you, that you do not give your children an opportunity to partake in its joy and share in its celebration. The menorah is a wonderful symbol of the light that your people brought to mankind. Why are you ashamed of it? Many thanks, and wishing me a Merry Christmas as a really good friend, one of your best. I wish you a happy Hanukkah.
All right, it's cute. Now, I put these things up there, and it's a little dated, only because I mean maybe it's not. Maybe because some of you know people like that, but that was clearly from, I think it's New York, you know, that kind of back east thing. My family, I was saying, I'm not only my mother's sister, but all of my aunts and uncles in New York had, if they didn't have Christmas trees, you know, it was that secular kind of thing, you know. And oh, and by the way, my birthday is I'm not asking for presents. My birthday is December 20th, next week. So I was one of those kids who got one present, right? One present for my birthday and for Christmas and for Hanukkah. You know, and it was hi Marty, you know, this is from your aunt so and so in New York, and also I always felt like I was ripped off because he misses you, mommy. Jessica's, you have two kids, right, Jessica? All right, she's busy. Um, I started to say, we we will often have people who will be in interfaith marriages, and there the question is, what do you do? Now, I mean, some of you guys, it'll be, I would put it this way, for you guys, I would say don't do both, do one or the other. And this has to do with, you know, children's understanding. But I'm not going to tell Jessica what to do with her home, you know, and Rick is married to a lovely woman, Amber Dawn. So I've gotten past the statement that it must be this or it must be that. But what I do think is important is to have one river. This is getting into the issue of intermarriage. You can say, you know, mommy is Korean, daddy is Jewish, you have Asian features, but you okay, thank you. But you know, you are Jewish. Now this has changed a lot because we have so many people in synagogues today that are Jews of color, Jews from multiracial relationships. Angela Bookdahl is one of the most famous rabbis in the country, if not in the world. She's the rabbi of Central Synagogue in New York. I spent the summer, July, she was on the same conference as I. Now, Angela, I believe her mother may have converted. She's of, I don't want to get it wrong. She's of Asian background. I went to do another bar mitzvah on in Queens, and the rabbi was a Japanese American who had converted to Judaism, and he was a rabbi. So things have changed. So we're not more fluid these days, you know, not just about gender. But okay, thank you, Jessica. So why don't we open up for discussion? Is there a way for us to be strong, not just Christmas and Hanukkah, that's just arbitrary, that's this season of the year. I'm sensitive to the fact that I'm not in, Debbie, we may have lost. Debbie said the other day that Jews that live in Oklahoma tend to fit in with Oklahomans. And I think the same thing is true with Cheyenne people, is there's this feeling that, you know, don't be too what's too this, too that. But okay, Jessica, open up to you. Go ahead. Tell me more about you guys. So is Chris comfortable with you celebrating all the Jewish holidays?
Is my husband comfortable?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, Omar is his name.
Oh, Omar. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Your husband is Omar.
Yeah.
And oh, Chris is Taylor's husband's name. My bad. Oh, yeah, by the way, Taylor couldn't make it tonight because of the boys. One at Leo, she has his heart. My bad. Oh, please forgive me.
Oh no, it's all right. Oh
Okay.
yeah, he's comfortable, but he's still learning.
Yeah.
I've dived a little bit deeper into the faith,
Yeah.
and at this point I consider myself Jewish, even though I don't, you know, haven't done like the whole conversion process.
Right. Yeah.
But like I do a lot of studying. I do my Shabbat, you know, and I practice this and teach this to my kids.
How did you turn up all of a sudden? You missed a few classes and you
Yeah, I
started
did.
your services. I mean, I'm glad we're having this conversation because I don't want anybody to feel, oh, are we okay? Is it okay? Can I come in the door? Let's have I
My
say it very
husband,
good.
like, he leaves for a week, so
Oh, he's got the
it's
whole
hard
week.
for me, you know, to even come inside the synagogue with my kids, and it's so cold. So I've just been staying
Yeah.
home. Yeah. So
You're
but then I
on
decided
the
to,
base, right? Is he Air
yeah,
Force?
we're on base.
Okay,
Yeah, Air Force.
okay.
Yeah, but I decided to
And
show up again because
yeah,
I
yeah,
want the community.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's harder for us because we are so small. So that's personal, having to do with our synagogue. And frankly, I'll be honest with you guys. I hope everybody comes to the meeting on Sunday. You do not have to be a member to come um, to the general congregational meeting. By the way, the food is really good. So 10 o'clock Sunday morning. And then a Friday night, I'm leading services, but you might want to come if you don't, if it's too cold or you don't want to come in person, come Saturday morning for Torah study. We're supposed to have once Saturday morning a month. So we haven't had it for a long time. So I am instituting Torah study. And these two are looking at each other because they're saying we're coming. But going back to the general idea of, I don't want to talk about conversion tonight, but yes, Christina, you're not Jessica, you're not the first person who has said to me, person of color or not of color, who said, I'm already Jewish, right? I'm already acting like a Jew. Look at these two. They've been hanging out and doing this Jewish stuff for a long time. Another couple up in, well, the couple, but Dave Lucero is up in Rollins, and he came to us 3 years ago. He's already been practicing Judaism. His wife supports him. He's on the road a lot. So it's the times are different. And a beit-din, this, so you know, I've said this before, the beit-din will not turn a person away if their partner does not convert with them. That used to be the case, but it's good. It's important that they support you. So very cool. All right. Well, wait a minute. What time is it now? 8:22. Open up for conversation. Jewish, Christian. Yes, I think, Jessica, that would be good. If you want to meet in person, we can do that, but it would be also, we can do it like this, just the three of us. It's nicer in person, but yeah, especially because I don't want to say this make anybody sad. I only have until the end of June to be your rabbi. And that's why I want to get all this, taken care of. But come to the synagogue, feel welcome. And if anything, this is the time of year. Hanukkah will be huge. Our Hanukkah, we have 2 or 3 celebrations. One is we'll have Friday night, must be 27, is a big night because it's Shabbat. Although Hanukkah begins Wednesday night of Christmas Day in the evening. Okay, I don't know. I maybe I'll be available online. So the synagogue normally does their big Hanukkah blowout on the last night of Hanukkah. This year, that would fall on New Year's Day. Come on. So we're doing it instead Sunday, December 29. There will be latkes and songs, and everybody brings their own menorah. So, all right, shall I end with this? All right. Let's see. Sam, test you. Which is the first candle?
Oh,
You say,
man. I'm going to mess this up. The one
the
on
one
the
on
right.
the far right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your right, my left. Okay, this one. This is candle number 1. It's the third night. This is a quiz question. Maybe I'll send this to you guys. Quiz question. It's the third night. What candle do you light first? Well, you light the shamas first, the one in the middle. You got the shamas lit. What candle do you light first? Huh? What candle do you?
The third.
The third, right? You light the candle of the night that you're in. So it's 3, 2, 1, then 4, 3, 2, 1, then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And finally on the 8th night, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Second question about the menorah. Yes, the newest is always first. That's correct. Thank you, Christina. The second question, where is the menorah supposed to be put? Granted, you're probably going to put it on your table, on your sink, on a metal thing. Where is it supposed to go? Think of Christmas lights.
Your window?
In the window, public, facing out to publicize the miracle. See, we're proud, we're Jewish, we're here. Get used to it. Too bad, you know. And by the way, going back to that other guy, I never have had decorations on my house. But if I had kids, I might have done that, you know. I think it's kind of fun. And kids appreciate that. All right. Oh, by the way, I will send out to you guys, and you don't have to know the answers. I will send out a Hanukkah crossword puzzle, one version with the answers, one version without. You can look them up. Look up the questions. Look up the answers instead of cheating. And the other thing I have that I did, yes, there is someone in the neighborhood who has Hanukkah decorations. The other one I have is called, and this is my own private joke. I used to do this with kids. The Cotton Bowl, right? That's the that's New Orleans. That's I think it's Louisiana. The Rose Bowl, that's Pasadena. So the Latka Bowl, hey! So the Latka Bowl is a game I play with teams, and we have the blue dreidels and the yellow menorahs and the green Maccabees, and you're on a team. And then let's say Sam and Emily are on a team, and it's their questions, like, you know, password. And I ask Sam that question, which candle do you light first? Okay, let's see. I'll make an easy question. Stephanie, what was the name of the old man who started the rebellion? And he had five sons? Yes, the old man. Maybe Stephanie's not there anymore. Who remembers? Who knows the answer? Mattathias, the old man. What was the name of the third son who led the rebellion? Judas Maccabeus. Judah. All right. I mean, you don't have to know these now. What was the name of the son who died under the elephant by stabbing the elephant with a spear? Elephant. Elazar. Okay. I did this one last week. What was the name of the woman whose 7 sons were martyred? Maybe you don't remember that one. That's okay. That's why it's that right. The trivia contest, you can look up the answers too. Hannah, and her 7 sons. What was the name of the woman who killed the Syrian general? Judith. Okay, that's right. So you learn these things. All right, forget the history ones. Let me ask a different one. Oh, who knows what is the name? I'm just making an easy one. This is for 1 point. What is the name of the top we spin?
Dreidel.
Dreidel. All right. And another question is like for 2 points. What is the Hebrew name for dreidel? But I don't expect you to know that one. Sivivon. So we'll probably do those at the event too. Okay. Anybody have any parting shots? It's 8:29. Parting shots. I had a professor in rabbinical school. There was a tribe of the Parthians. The Parthians would shoot their arrows as they were retreating. So he would say, does anybody have any Parthian shots? Are you still there? Other than the 3 people I can see.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. Jamie's avatar, do you have a question or a comment? An argument?
I think her volume's having issues.
Oh, okay. Well, I love that cute little thing. It keeps on moving around, and her eyes to ha. Okay. All right. I appreciate you guys. Okay, applesauce. Oh, applesauce versus sour cream. That's a great question. I prefer sour cream on my latkes, but I also like because I like Indian spicy food. I like horseradish on my latkes too. And by that's a great assignment for next week. Oh, I'm sorry. Next week, the 17th. On the best of all possible worlds, I was thinking we would meet in person at the shul. Is there a vote for that?
My vote's yes.
You vote yes? Okay, we got two yeses. I would prefer to be here at home where it can be nice and warm, but if you, I'll tell you what, if you guys write to me, if you want to meet at the shul, just so we can be in person, I'll do that and we'll hang out. But my intent for next week is to do a kind of a comprehensive review of this whole period with questions and answers, and maybe if we met in person, then maybe we show one of the films. I will not show The Life of Brian, only because the version I have is unrated, and it's a little too risque. But you might want to watch it online. It's very funny and very meaningful. And remember, it's not it's oh, and then there's this whole section. Brian Graham Chapman was Jewish. So was Eric Idle.
Mhm.
Huh? Oh, trivia. So Graham Chapman, in the movie, he says, his mother says, "Oh, you're a Roman." He says, "No, mother, I'm a Jew. I'm a Hebe. I'm a kike." It's great. It's only Graham Chapman would make it funny. And Eric Idle, I mean, they were all assimilated, but Eric Idle was Jewish, and he gave a gig he had a gig in Denver. I missed it. It would have been a lot of money. Anyway, watch one of our movies for next week. And okay. Ride, Christina, where are you from? Where are you coming from? Yeah. Do you guys all have each other's email addresses now? I think you do. Except I got to add Jessica to your names. All right. Have a blessed rest of the evening. I'll see everybody Friday or Saturday or Sunday morning. If you can only come to one event between you and me, come Sunday, watch the fireworks. But I hope you can come Saturday morning where you will have the thrilling conclusion of the Jacob and Esau saga. All right. Thanks. God bless.
See ya.
Or as I say, namaste. All right.
Okay, Christina, if you're there, just send me an email if you want us to drive by. Okay.